Sees us into a wish list 2 weeks.
Right.
Insurance, they have them on sale for like $6.
Well, welcome, everybody. Can you hear me in the back? Oh, that's all right. Stay there. Thank you for coming today. I'm just going to give a very brief introduction, and then Dan Olson, our planning director, is going to have a few remarks and general overview of what our draft 2022 comp plan looks like. I think you are aware that we're having a couple of open houses. This is the first of 2. We've had 4 different sessions with the Planning and Zoning Commission up to this point. We'll have some more when this is done. We're taking in comments, suggestions, ideas, and we'll be discussing what comes out of the open houses with the Plan Commission. And welcome. And then ultimately proceed to the City Council, which will take its time as well. And we'll have probably a couple sittings to discuss the proposed plan there. So what is a comprehensive plan? How many of you had a chance to look online? I don't know if you've had a chance. There are some handouts today. Among them is just an overview of some of the key features that we'd like you to consider. And by the way, this isn't your only chance, as I've outlined. There are other chances, but after today, while it's still fresh, if you have some ideas, please let Dan know, and we can make your contact information known to everybody. And you're welcome to contact me as well. So well, let me just go back here, a little bit of history. So 2005 was the last time we did a comp plan. Before that, there wasn't one, was there one between 1969 and 2005? Do you remember? 96. 96, okay. So, all right, my fingerprints are on it. I was here then. I knew somebody would get me on that. Yeah, busted. But interestingly, plans are supposed to be an impression or a vision. They're not meant to be prescriptive in detail. There are other ways that happens. We have ordinances which can get really down into the nth detail about things. It's also not a zoning document. The 2 are really different. We have zoning codes and zoning map, which identifies the zoning for each of the parcels in town, if you can kind of open it up and see that level of detail. But as you go through the plan, as you have a chance, and we have some maps here, just to give you an idea in a pictorial way, how we see different types of growth happening: industrial, commercial, residential, institutional, and green space. But please take a chance to, or take a moment to look at that, and when you get a chance, take a look at the text. It's been thoughtfully pulled together, and hopefully you'll find it at least stimulating enough to maybe share some of your own thoughts. I went back to 1969 because, interestingly, in Sycamore and in DeKalb in 1969, the latest thing, the big thing, was turn the downtowns into a walking mall. So in Sycamore, State Street was going to be rerouted, and people could just walk around the downtown on what used to be State Street, and in DeKalb it was Lincoln Highway. And so there would have been a lot of cost to that plan with the rerouting, and property would have had to be purchased and so forth. It never came to be, obviously. We're hoping that what we projected here is something that is sensible for the next 5 to 10 years, approximately, and hopefully in less than 10 years, there's another review. Interestingly, since 2005, the general areas where industrial might develop, where commercial might develop, where residential might develop, haven't changed remarkably, and as we look forward, probably won't change remarkably. And now we're seeing, though, on the south side, some areas that were designated for industrial or maybe light industrial, office research, something like that, now coming to fruition. And that's been a long time, though. At the same time, on the north side, when the Chodine Company came in and eventually went through the annexation process, there's a very large area that was annexed with a preliminary plan for housing. There have been no houses built in that as yet, but that's still designated as residential. We did one other thing, and I'm going to sit down in a minute and yield to Dan. I have a bias about the wonderful farmland that we have around us, and I think as we look out, instead of doing what is often done, where we go out to our 1.5 mile planning jurisdiction from all points on the map. It's not a perfect circle, it's kind of like this. And we're allowed to color that in the kind of uses that we think would make sense. And oftentimes what a city will do is color them in as you get to the periphery of the planning area in yellow or whatever the single-family residential is. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, especially since it's not logical that certain things would happen in the span of time that the plan covers. So we're leaving that ag. We will have ag zoning in the city of DeKalb, and I think that's true to the county's plan for all of our 14 municipalities in the county. Which is to grow out from the core of your community. That way we save the farmland. Okay, we have two of our planning zoning commissioners here, our chair, Max Maxwell, Shannon Stoker is here, and we do have an alderman, Scott McAdams, in the back. So without any further ado, this is Dan Olson, who is our Director of Planning, and he will take you further. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, on the side, as mentioned, that we do have some copies of the future land use plan with some of the primary changes. We did copy the urban design guidelines chapter and also the goals and objectives. Those are in the back. And we also have comment cards or sheets that you can comments on, and contact information at the bottom of that with my email. And we have a website location for the open house on our website, and that's noted there too. As Bill mentioned, this is the first open house. We'll have another one on July 14th. That's a Thursday at 4 to 6 here in this room also. And there'll be somewhat the same format. So as Bill mentioned, the comprehensive plan, usually 2005 was the last time we updated that. The comp plan, most cities do the comp plan. They're pretty typical in terms of the order. You usually have an introduction, a background data, you're gathering information, then you have a goals and objectives statements in there, and then the big plan or the big item is the land use map. What future land use, not zoning, but for vacant properties, what do you want to see in that particular parcel in terms of land uses? And we have land uses that are broken down into 3 different types of residential, commercial, and industrial, which encompasses all types of industrial uses, data centers, distribution warehouses, etc. And then we added urban design guidelines to this plan, which give guidance to how buildings should be built through the city. And as Bill mentioned, the plan is for the next 5 to 10 years. That's usually the thing. The city, since 2005, certainly hasn't done anything. The city's approved several corridor plans since that time, covering downtown, Pleasant Street, East Lincoln Highway, Pearl Street, and most recently, Annie Glen North plan, which was approved in November of 2018. So the city has certainly been planning since that time, but this is the first comprehensive plan update. And these plans, this plan doesn't cancel these out or anything. It tries to incorporate some of their suggestions into this plan. So they're kind of accessory to this plan also. So as I mentioned, the plan goes through inventory analysis of the city. And I just pulled a few graphics from this. This is a population change since 1900. And between 2010 and 2020, we did lose population, about 8.14% of the population. The state lost population too. So We have some goals and objectives is try and change that to increase housing, and that relates to a lot of different things from property taxes to additional commercial, industrial uses which need more employees, which will need housing in the city. This is the population by race. DeKalb is certainly a diverse community. 66% identify as white, 13% black or African American, 13% Hispanic or Latino, and 5% Asian. And this is pretty similar to the state percentages in Illinois in terms of ethnic groups. A chart on the employers in the community, the largest ones, and rank them between 2020 and 2010. NIU is still the largest. They had a slight drop in employment with their little drop in enrollment. Large gains, of course, with Target, a distribution center, Ferrera Candy Company, Sunoco, and the school district a little bit. And soon, next year, we'll have Amazon on there, I'm sure, and the Facebook data center. So in terms of industrial, which Bill mentioned a little bit, that certainly has grown a lot in the last few years. The EAV actually from 2020 to 21 grew by $11.7 million. That owes a lot to the new Ferrera Candy Company distribution center and packing center, and also a portion of the Facebook development. So we see the valuations: industrial, commercial, and residential. Big increase in industrial and commercial. Residential has been struggling, particularly single-family permits. I did break down the units for single-family and multifamily. 9 permits in 2021. We're projected to probably be close to that this year. Multifamily has certainly increased, particularly with the developments such as Plaza DeKalb, the Cornerstone, Isaac Suites, Agora Tower, with those mixed-use developments, has increased. So we've seen good increases in multifamily development in the city. This an interesting slide that we have in there shows the number of platted lots in single-family, multifamily developments, and the number of units built there. So Iron Gate is that's a project between the high school and Bethany Road, approved in 2013. Large project. That was a preliminary plat that was annexed and zoned and platted, but you can see how many lots there are. So there's actually 1,300 lots that are in inventory that a home could be built on. Iron Gate's preliminary, they don't have a final plat, but it's approved lots. So there's a lot of inventory already in the city for single-family home, and also for multifamily. There's about 243 vacant lots for multifamily. So that's one of the reasons why, as Bill mentioned, I'll shift down to the 2005 plan quick just to show what we're talking about. So this is a 2005 plan and just some orientation. So the bridge is the River Mist up here, and the city limits are in the black dashed line, or the urban planning area. But you can see in the 1.5 miles, the intent back then was all single family out to 1.5 miles from the city's limits. And then they had little commercial nodes in there. So that's obviously didn't happen. And the projection is that thinking population was 60, 70,000 for DeKalb at that time. So with this plan, with large inventory of lots already in the city and other infill possibilities for residential development, we really scaled back that 1.5 mile area in terms of what uses would go in there. It's mostly ag uses now, with limited areas for future annexation. So jumping back to the housing capacity. So I thought that was an interesting kind of thing that really had a big direction on what we did with the comp plan and putting the draft together. So with all the inventory and background, as you mentioned, we had 4 meetings with the Planning and Zoning Commission looking at the draft. What are the planning issues? What should the plan look at? What land uses should we develop within the 1.5 miles of the perimeter of the city? What public policies should we have for those areas? How they're going to be treated? And with the recent industrial developments, How do we enhance those? How do we use those? Are going to be additional careers? How do we do with job training, et cetera? Support the families, provide housing or opportunities for housing to accommodate those workers. The pace of residential development, how do we keep that going with industrial development? Looking at the commercial tax base, retail, certainly a big difference out there nationwide with brick and mortar stores compared to online purchasing. That certainly has changed. So we have those larger commercial areas, and what do we do with those? And how do we preserve the quality of life in the city? So the goals and objectives, I just listed the different groups, categories, and then the goal and the objectives are in the handouts if you want to look, but I'll run through a few of those certainly. Community appearance, we want to keep the identity of the college town, DeKalb, NIU, while promoting the tax base and keeping it a community-oriented service and jobs. Some of the things in there I'd mentioned, completion of the TIF funds or TIF projects in the downtown, what's going on now with the East Lincoln Highway project between the 1st and 4th Street funded by TIF. That will increase the sidewalk area downtown, more pedestrian friendly, reduce the speed of traffic, truck traffic through the downtown area. We want to look at gateways into the city, making sure they're identified or common gateway themes through the city. And also our urban design guidelines, which have recommendations for commercial, industrial, residential development. Industrial development, retain our quality industrial firms and diversify the tax base. So we want to continue to work with partners, DC, EDC, the Chamber of Commerce, IDOT, the state, in marketing these industrial sites in the southeast portion of the city. We have a lot of momentum going in that area, and we want to keep that going. Help facilitate development in that area with infrastructure like road improvements, making sure those are in line, and working with like ComEd and others to make sure the infrastructure is there so it's appealing to the industrial users. Cooperate, of course, with the school district, Kitch College, NIU, with training programs, and also redevelopment of some of the areas that are not in that TIF, like Pleasant Street, older industrial areas between North 14th and Peace Road. Commercial, promote the community-orientated developments, and as I mentioned, we do have quite a few these larger commercial areas with retail struggling a little bit, so we have allowed recently different non-retail uses in there. We have a climate-controlled self-storage facility and a strip center. We have we approved of some residential units in a building that have been offices since it was constructed on the upper level. Fitness centers, so kind of look at other uses for some of the strip centers so they can get full occupancy and have income coming in and to make improvements on that. Look at different corridors beyond Sycamore Road. Of course, Annie Glenn redevelopment, Hillcrest and Blackhawk Roads, which is in the AGN plan, which is certainly fluid in process with the city-owned corner there and the demolition of that building. That'll be for future mixed use. Looking at areas like South 4th Street, maybe doing a corridor plan there or an overlay district to take a focus on that to help revitalize that corridor. Looking at, which we've looked at a little before, even discussed a little bit with the council, parking requirements to make sure we don't demanding too much parking beyond the use. Those areas looking at restaurants and multifamily, so we don't pave over large areas that we have the parking requirements really meet the demand of the particular use. Residential development, promote the preservation of neighborhoods, of course, with looking at allowing higher density developments, over 12 units per acre with a planned development, as long as it's compatible with the neighborhood and meets the needs of the community. A few of the past projects are in that 20 to 30 dwelling units an acre. Some of the Pappas projects are that. So that's the density that we're kind of looking at, and those fit in pretty well. Connecting pedestrian ways, bike paths around the city, and again, our urban design guidelines encouraging residential development, kind of a variety of residential developments in terms of architecture and projects. Again, promoting affordable housing is a big key, looking at smaller lot sizes and smaller homes, approving those in the city, allowing them in our UDO. Downtown enhancement, keeping the vitality of the downtown with the TIF financing, our TIF AIP program, that's Architectural Improvement Program, allowing upper floor residential with lower level commercial uses. Also looking at signage and wayfinding, that's guiding people through the city and common signage and themes to get them to points of interest and public parking spaces. Look at extending our downtown streetscape to other streets such as Locust and Grove Street, and looking at TIF funds for redevelopment of the other buildings downtown, such as McCabe's and 3rd Street between 3rd and 4th. And economic development, of course, continue that to climate where people want to work, live in the community, maintaining that business-friendly attitude that we have and working with our partners and to keep that going. So we have several objectives there to encourage that. We also have a statement about community facilities, natural features, and transportation. Community facilities dealing with other taxing districts too. Natural features, open space, several objectives on that, and transportation, making sure our roadways are up to date. Also our transit facilities. So we do have a siting for a transit facility that's ongoing right now, and that's going to be critical to the quality of life of the residents of DeKalb. So that's the goals and objectives. Again, there's copies back there that have specific listings of all of them. Moving to the land use percentage, we did a chart between the 05 plan and the 2020 plan, or 2022, with the percentage acres and the percent there, and you can see the changes. Large reduction in new single-family areas. As I mentioned, we used to have, within the mile-and-a-half area, large swaths of single-family developments. We've scaled that way back due to our large inventory we already have. Decrease in commercial a little bit. That was due to the fact that some of those areas, residential, had those commercial nodes out there that never developed with the residential. Increase in industrial, of course, in the southeast portion of the city. And increase in the ag area in the mile-and-a-half. Primary features, which there's copies back on the desk, as mentioned, and I'll just jump to the plan here, and I broke it down into the quadrants. So the northwest quadrant, this orientation, so my clicker worked too good, that's the Bridges, River Mist, and Annie Glen here. As you can see, in the city boundary is the black dashed line here. You can see we're leaving large areas of the mile-and-a-half in ag. That's ag designation, with a few limited new potential single-family low-density areas. This is the Iron Gate development. We just replicated what was approved on their preliminary plan for that development. So you can see just, and there's parcels already pretty much surrounded by this city that potentially could be some development, particularly residential. So we didn't go too far beyond the current city boundaries for any new development. This is the southwest part of the city. This is the tollway here in Annie Glen Road. Again, we have just limited this a parcel next to the current city limits of potential annexation in the future. Commercial at Fairview and Annie Glen. In industrial, low expansion down by First Street and Gerler Road, some new industrial, and along Route 23 on both sides. This is Gerler Road and 23. Some new industrial areas. This is a Meta site here and Ferreira here. So continuing those areas down to Kessinger Road. This is the northeast portion of the city. Orientation, this is Airport, Peace Road here. Again, continuing the industrial area up there and matching up to our boundary agreements we have with Sycamore and Cortland. This is the southeast part of the city. This is the Peace Road interchange with I-88 Oasis. This area covers the Ferrera, Amazon, and Meta sites. So again, continuation of industrial down to Kessinger. The dashed diagonal lines here reflects the special use permit approved by the county last year for the large solar farm that was approved south of the Meta site. So we're just indicating the half industrial, half transportation utilities in case that project doesn't go forward, or if it ends in the future, we want to revert back to industrial, down to Kessinger. It's a downtown. A lot of the change, a lot of the effort into the plan was related to just getting the current existing land uses covering the city. That took a lot of time, going through that almost block by block, parcel by parcel to make sure that matched up to all the recent developments since '05 and matching up with the existing land use. So that took a lot of time. So it's a map that has not just future land uses, but a very good indication of existing land uses. Part of the map is an inset map to cover, make sure we did cover the mile-and-a-half areas. So in the mile-and-a-half, we do have some jurisdiction in Illinois. Cities can apply their subdivision standards within a mile-and-a-half. We're also, if the county gets a rezoning or a special use petition in that area, they'll have to notify the city, and we have the right or option to object to that particular use. So. But DeKalb County, as Bill mentioned, their plan, they've always encouraged for several decades now with any development really should be contiguous to a city and annex into that. So, but they do have some county developments like the solar farm that we do recognize on the plan here, and other commercial uses in the county we do recognize here, and other smaller single-family subdivisions. So. In the area south of Kessinger, that reflects this dash line, that solar farm that was approved, but with an ag designation with it. So if it ever goes away, we recommend that return to ag type uses. The urban design guidelines, again, copies back there, all the details, but we wanted to give some direction. So right now, through our zoning process, we do review architectural renderings that come in with projects. If it's a planned development or special use, we have that option. So what we're proposing here is to strengthen that language in our UDO to, particularly with special uses, to give us that opportunity, and then give some guidance on what things should look like between residential, commercial, industrial. We've had a few projects come in that there have been comments on how it appeared and maybe giving a little bit better design to those. So we want to develop guidelines to help developers. We can share with them so they know what direction the city wants to go into when we go through projects. So each of these has a guideline and then action item, several of them for each. And I won't go through all those. There's copies in the back, of course. For single family, two family, residential, we want good architecture, perhaps garages on the side or the rear so they don't dominate the front of the home. A variety of residential looks in subdivisions instead of everything looking the same. Multifamily, these buildings, a variety in colors, a variety in textures. Not a solid wall, but different elevation types to kind of break up the building is encouraged. Commercial, somewhat the same thing, a variety of looks, more pedestrian friendly with plenty of landscaping. And also the things with parking and open space and stormwater detention, and just giving more details what we're looking for. When somebody comes in, then we can provide them this document, and here's what we're looking for. So they get some guidance on it. Industrial too. This is a Meta site before it was built, so we gotta make sure industrial sites look good and are set back and have adequate buffers to other type of uses. And then we also cover public institutional uses, some guidelines on stormwater detention systems, that they fit in with the area, more natural looking parking lots too with adequate landscaping, directions on guidance on signage, and also accessory structures. So as mentioned, that we do, what we're looking for is some just feedback. It's a public input time. So we're going to have another open house on July 14th, same format. And then we'll have official public hearing in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission, which is required. We're looking to have that probably August 1st or the 15th, where there'll be official public hearing in front of the commission, and the recommendation will come down to the commission, and that goes on to the city council, who will look at the plan and make a decision for approval. And that, we're looking at the end of August, early September at the latest for that approval. So we do have a few more months here or so to gather some public comments, make any changes. I'll take any questions now. We are videotaping this, and we will have a link on our webpage, on our YouTube channel, where you can view this if you wish. So we can take any questions now. We'll be here till 6. You're more than welcome to come up and look at the maps in detail, gather the information, and we'll be around to answer any questions you have. Is there any? Yeah, go ahead.
Next one, is there, within the residential area, is there anyone looking at multi-generational housing? Can that go into just a single-family residential, or?
Yeah, the residential covers multifamily too, and looking at, different types of housing, smaller housing that includes, additional unit on the lot perhaps with, they call them granny flats, or perhaps that have a smaller unit for another family member or something. And our UDO right now, does it accommodate that how much? You can do a planned development and accomplish that, but yes, we're encouraging a variety of different types of housing.
We have friends that the main core of the house is kitchen, living room, dining room, but on each side, there's individual family units.
Right.
One for the grandparents, and then one for their child with grandchildren,
Yeah.
all within one house. And each of them also have, like the one side of the grandparents would have a second small kitchen
Mhm.
and sitting area where if it was too much for grandma and grandpa, they could go hide, but the rest of the house. And it would be probably a larger lot, but does that fall within?
Currently, right now, our UDO doesn't, accommodate like 3 units in one structure unless it was multifamily zoning, of course. But a single family don't. But the guidelines here do encourage a variety of housing and smaller lots, smaller homes, and to accommodate these trends that are happening,
Yeah, as a result of COVID, I think I see more and more families that have become multi-generational homes, and they're hard-end homes
Yeah.
that we call a standard home now, but it might be something you could look at. And I just want to make sure the city won't turn that kind of a development away if it becomes more of a trend, because it's appearing within the current houses that are
Yeah, you're right.
out there.
I actually am aware of the trend. In fact, I'm looking for somebody to take care of me. I will make sure that there are some provisions in the code.
Yeah.
But seriously, I'm half serious about that too, but our planning and zoning specific codes fall in the Unified Development Ordinance, we call it UDO, we're all into acronyms, but that's where the detail can be fleshed out, and we could have workshops along those lines before the Planning and Zoning Commission and change the rules, so to speak. I mean, now, it's probably happening informally anyway. The in-law suite, if it's a bigger house and a bigger lot, as you say. But then there are other ways to do it with smaller houses too. But people have to have a little different mindset about what's needed, and we're all, and that's a generational thing too. And so I know I'm open, and Dan's open to creative thinking along those lines.
I know, years ago, everybody wanted their own space, and now it really is more and more that families want to be there for each other.
Yeah.
And through the whole pandemic, I think it has changed a lot of the thinking of people.
Yeah, and I think as empty nesters are considering, gee, I kind of like this, I like that, and there's nothing out there that's really like, maybe this wouldn't be the year to build, maybe, but we have a home builder who can convince us otherwise. But as pricing, maybe it makes that a more attractive option. All that has to be sorted through. I mean, and is the city open to some smaller, we have some smaller lots in the single-family zoning. We want to go smaller. All that, I think, open for conversation. One of the beauties of a comp plan discussion, it gets some energy going around, some new ideas, and then after the plan is, because the plan doesn't address that in specifics, but then it gives rise to this kind of conversation. And should in the next months have those discussions while it's fresh.
Any more?
Can I say one last thing, and Max?
Sorry, just to address that question, I certainly appreciate your position. I can see that happening more frequently. I mean, it's very much a European model where multi-generations are living together for long periods of time. I think the difficulty is finding the dividing line, whereas it is immediate associated family, and the neighbor next door to you doesn't necessarily have multiple cousins and cousins of cousins and sisters of cousins, and then the next thing you know, you've got 8 cars in the driveway and parked along the street next to your neighbor, and when that house is sold, it's actually becomes a 3-flat or a 2-flat. And so I certainly think that we can find a way to accommodate that. It's just the question of making sure that your neighbor doesn't turn his house into an apartment complex.
Okay, well, help yourself to walk around, ask questions, look at the maps in more detail, and thanks for coming.